Auckland is in a housing crisis. And when you understand the facts, calling it a housing crisis won't seem controversial. Auckland is the fourth most unaffordable city in the world in which to buy a house. We need to build 14,000 houses every single year for the next 30 years to meet demand. But despite our total fixation on housing and all the talk to date, we are still only building just over half the number of houses that our city urgently needs. Many of our key workers, our teachers, our nurses, our police, are leaving the city because that is the only way that they believe that they can actually get on the housing ladder. And if we don't find a solution to fix this pressing issue for our city, the future looks bleak. Auckland isn't alone on this. Many cities right throughout the world are struggling with the same issue. Like Auckland, they are challenged to find a big fix to a big problem. I'm convinced, though, that there is a solution to fix our housing crisis, and I'll come to that in a moment. Now, right now, I'm sure many of you are sitting there thinking, Leonie, you might just be a bit crazy. And that's okay, because there has been times in the last 18 months since I launched this initiative to solve the housing crisis when I've thought the same myself. But before I start taking my blue pills, I do remind myself of times when people have told me I've been crazy before. Last year, on the 13th of August, we celebrated the 21st anniversary of the launch of the website realestate.co.nz. Now, many of you may be familiar with that website. It's the site with all the properties for sale and for rent in New Zealand. Now, I was responsible for the launch of that site in August 1996, and at the time it was called realens.co.nz. Now, the reason I share this story is that when you look at realestate.co.nz today, you would think it was obvious, almost inevitable. But 22 years ago, it wasn't. The real estate industry didn't want to do anything together. Technology was pretty limited. And the typical response I got at the time when I talked about the concept, apart from being laughed at, ignored, or criticised, was, Leonie, nobody will ever buy property this way. So it was fair to say that supporters and believers weren't exactly thick on the ground. So when people sometimes say to me over the years, Leonie, your vision sounds a bit crazy, I get that. Because often people just see what is there today. But I see what could be and the steps to get there. Now, the solution to our housing crisis in all its detail can be found on my website, www.thehomepage.nz. The solution, I believe, is an initiative called Collective Impact. And very simply, this is a structured framework that has been used extensively all around the world to solve big, complex, seemingly intractable social problems. And in effect, what it does is it brings all the sector groups together, involved in a particular issue, focused on a common vision and targets, an agreed plan, and an absolute resolute focus on delivering results and outcomes. Now, one of my most favourite examples of a successful collective impact initiative in New Zealand is the People's Project in Hamilton. And in 2013, a group of city leaders down there set a really ambitious goal, which was to end homelessness and rough sleeping in central Hamilton. And they did it by bringing all the sector groups. They brought government, council, the business community, the charity groups, the churches, everybody involved, and they worked together over the subsequent years. They've had fantastic results and have dealt with over 900 people, and by the end of 2016 have ended rough sleeping in Hamilton. This is the approach that I believe that we can adopt in Auckland to solve our housing crisis. So how do we do it? So like many great ideas, it's simple and logical, and there are 4 key steps. The first one is about a vision. Because despite all the talk that we go through on housing, we still do not have a clear vision and targets that we all can get in behind and support. So as some examples, my targets include 14,000 houses every year, half of which are affordable, an end to homelessness in our city, increasing home ownership to 65%, including Māori and Pacific Islanders, improving housing quality, social housing for those in need, and the list goes on. The second step is about structure, because once you've got the vision, the next thing to ask is how do we get there? And typically, successful collective impact initiatives put in a small non-for-profit entity that acts as a coordinating group and brings all the sector groups together. So in property, this includes the government, the council, iwi groups, the private sector developers, the finance community, the community housing sector, and the list goes on. The third step is about a housing framework. And this is designed to help people understand the complex jigsaw that housing is. And the fourth step is a unified action plan. And this is about getting people out of their individual silos into a clear, unified plan that we can all get in behind. So how have we been going? So we launched this in October 2016, and we've had great support and encouragement, particularly from many of the delivery side of the property sector. Sadly, we've had little input from the public sector, but it's certainly created a lot of discussion and debate. And earlier this year, we got, for the first time ever, every sector group, including the new Minister of Housing and the Deputy Mayor and every other sector group, to a meeting and agreed to go forward. Disappointingly, 3 days later, the council pulled out. And what's even more disappointing, they still haven't provided any alternative solution. But momentum continues to build. And I'm often reminded of that quote which says that the power of the people is greater than the people in power, particularly when you've got a right cause and the right purpose. Not finding a solution to perhaps the biggest issue facing our city is not an option. And the fact is, when you look at these successful collective impact initiatives all around the world, they have never been started by local or central government politicians. They have always been started by a group of city leaders saying enough is enough. So what we're hearing now is that message enough is coming through loud and clear. What we must now focus on is how we deliver those results and outcomes. Auckland deserves nothing less. Thank you.